I am here with my friend Jason Kay, who is a cartomancer and my Twitter pal. And we are going to talk today about the Eight of Wands, and not necessarily this Eight of Wands, but just the Eight of Wands in general. And Jason, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Jason, the Eight of Wands, what does that card kind of mean to you? And I know we're going to talk a little bit about fixed meaning versus not fixed meaning, but I want to start with kind of what is your impression of that card just presented to you out of context?
Of like what I have like studied of sort of single card meanings and sort of the Golden Dawn attributions, I feel like the Eight of Wands is probably one of the more straightforward ones. Most places kind of agree on the name, on kind of this idea of swiftness, or calling it the Lord of Swiftness. And in most Rider-Waite-Smith style decks, there is some connotation that the Eight Wands are kind of like flying through the air. They're like zooming, they're like speeding through like arrows. So it's kind of everything to do with what happens suddenly in a burst. And I think, I forget the exact quote of like what Crowley says about it, but there is something about like this, the quickness of it is, the connotation is that there's a lot of power, but not a lot of like stamina. So like whatever is happening, like happens like, it's like the charge is like there, and then the charge is released, and then that's the end of the Eight of Wands moment. And it's interesting. I don't really like. I'm sort of still kind of exploring some of the Golden Dawn attributions, but I know kind of like if you take the deck in association with the Eight of Wands, which is Mercury and Sagittarius. I think I got this mostly from Susie Chang's books, but like, you know, you can look at the majors for that combination. So you have Mercury with Magician and Sagittarius with Temperance. And she writes about kind of like how this is sort of like the like alchemical sort of like combo, the mixing of the cups and like the magician's like work essentially. And in my mind, like when I think about that with Eight of Wands, I'm also seeing it's, you know, chemistry or alchemy, but it's like, it's kind of the moment when all the stuff is like mixed together, and like, you know, maybe there's like a brief pause while all the ingredients are like catalyzing, and then suddenly you get like that poof of smoke, or like that like bubbling over of the flask. Like, and it's just like, it's like, well, we're two separate things, like now we're doing something that is like totally different than either one of them by themselves.
That's that. So I don't want to interrupt too much, but I wanted to mention it feels like this card here, imagery, the things you're saying are echoing really well in my mind from kind of what you're saying. Like, for example, the idea of swiftness and movement and combination. The wands in our deck are all trees. That's kind of just the type of thing we associate with the suit. But this is the only wand or tree card that's full of birds, essentially. So this is a sycamore tree. It's in say March, April. They fill up with herons. So all the herons flying. Talk about arrows and spears, right? And the herons all show up,
like
and they have a mating session that looks really pretty brief, but it's very wild and loud, and they're awesome birds. And so this is just this moment in the spring. It just they come together and breed, and then it dissipates. And
that frenzy of activity. Yeah, I think that's, you know, that was something I was trying to like think through when I was like contemplating this card, because like on the one hand, like there is you know, that intensity of energy sort of, I don't know, it can almost connote like a chaotic kind of thing, like sort of like, whoa, like what is happening, kind of like that like Uranian kind of like lightning bolt. I mean, like you see lightning bolts like in a lot of the depictions of the Eight of Wands, but it It actually seems like, kind of thinking about it more, even though that intensity is like, the magnitude of it is great and the speed of it is really great, it's usually aimed at something. Like there is sort of some sense of like purpose behind it, despite
Yeah.
like the apparent chaos of it. And like I love kind of what you linked it to with your card, because like it's like, whoa, what is happening in that tree? But like we're doing something here, and then we're like moving on. But like there's a point to like everything gathering. And so I
And
think
I love it. It's accidental. I will tell you, it's accidental. I
I
love it.
mean, isn't that the entire story of tarot's history? Is accidental meaning? That's what I love about it. Yeah, yeah.
I love that accidental meaning. Oh.
But I mean, I think it introduces a useful like interpretive like ambiguity, um, because with that power and with the sense of like, it's like aiming or not aiming. It's like, are you aiming it? Like, and so there's a question if like there is this Eight of Wands energy available. Do you know what you're pointing it at? Or is this power just going to be like discharged in like a random direction?
I wanted to ask a little bit about your process. How do you look at the tension between these kind of words like purpose, these fixed meanings versus not using fixed meanings? Let's start there, because
it was probably about 2 years ago that I got back into tarot, and it was mostly through kind of what people were writing about with like the open style reading that I mostly got from Yav Bendav, and kind of other Tarot de Marseille readers who read like him are kind of like looking back to like an earlier tradition of like fortune telling in a way that's sort of moving like pre sort of like complex like Victorian esoteric um, associations. And I think what I found compelling about it is like, I dipped my toes into tarot like many times, like for many years, like probably since high school, and it was always fascinating. But I think the dead end that I always like felt like I was like hitting is that when I pulled a card, it felt like I was like reciting verse from like like a religious text almost. Like it's just like, oh, like that's John 11, like I just, well, that's what comes up immediately. And I know there is a way to kind of get to the other side of it, but for me, like being such a kind of like systems left-brained like Mercury kind of person, it kind of got me a little bit too much in my head. And so like I'm like, all right, I already get myself there easy enough, so I feel like I don't need more of that. And I think what I found in the uh, the open style readings was that it kind of forced me to kind of move into this like beginner's mind place where like I'm just like okay, this Eight of Wands does not mean anything. Like what is it like next to, like what is like emerging out of all of this? And like, so no, like single cards not having fixed meanings, like the spread not having fixed meanings. And it became this like much more interesting like contemplative meditative experience for me, where I would just start observing things about like just on a concrete level about what was there sticks. Like it's like, oh, that is kneeling down. Suddenly this whole world, this whole like story emerged in this completely different way. Oh, am I gone again?
No, you're here. We've got you. Do you see me?
Oh,
no, we had you the whole time.
Yeah, you froze, so I wasn't sure. Dang. Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
We had you.
Yeah, I doubted for a second. I was like, I saw the red light. Yeah,
you're talking about the cards, so I had to like grab mine and start shuffling again. You got me antsy.
Totally. Yeah, no, and I think just when I get to that place, because it sometimes it comes fast and sometimes it's slow, but it kind of feels like miraculous either way, because when it comes slow, I'm just like looking at cards, I'm looking at pictures, and I'm like, I don't know what is happening here. I just keep with the describing. I keep like seeing what I see, like what has changed from one card to the other, and like the sequence of things, and like um and then kind of like it, it's actually perfect that we're talking about the Eight of Wands, but like after like I got nothing, I don't see anything, I don't know what the hell this is saying, and then like this Eight of Wands moment where like all the pieces just kind of like come together, and it like just like those three cards like revivify into this like vibrant like tapestry, and like the meaning could not be more clear. And I don't know, I've never done like formal like koan training like in the Zen tradition, but I feel like this is like the feeling that I get from it is always how I imagine the engagement of koan practice is like you kind of struggle with this like absurd like terrible story, like image really sometimes, like that's all it is. And you go to the teacher and you're like, and you get like all analytical about it, and your teacher's like, no, that's fucking wrong, like go back to meditating and figure it out. And you just kind of like bash your head against the wall, and then suddenly you just get this kind of like this liminal like suspension in time where you're just like, oh shit. Like have you seen did you ever see that movie I Heart Huckabees?
God, it's been forever.
There's that scene where they're like hitting each other in the face with like a bouncy ball, and it's just like, it's like, hit me again. It's like, no, I got nothing. Hit me again. No, hit me again. And he's like, wait, I think I got it. And it like feels like that. And yeah, like I said, so I just love how it gets me out of a left brain mode, to really be so attentive to the act of looking, like in the way that you would sort of like gaze at artwork, but kind of letting your mind kind of roam a little bit more freely. And yeah, there's something just like pops out of that, and I absolutely love it. And I think there's a way to merge those two approaches, but I think for me, with my own temperament and excessive like head level orientation, I needed to like move away from trying to like memorize like complex like associations and like different levels of like meaning that are part of like one whole like integrated system. Like I love that shit, obviously, but it's my cat is hey.
We can't see your cat. I wish we could.
I know. She was messing with my altar. I think they're both attention starved, so they're going after the thing they know will piss me off.
Sure, absolutely. Oh God, that's funny. I wanted to comment briefly. I'll interrupt because and Jason, why don't we try to see if we get your video back up? Awesome.
Yeah, it looks like it's stabilized. Hopefully,
yeah.
It holds.
So I'm saying you're shuffling my cards because you talking about the cards and was like, I gotta go touch them. I've kind of done the same thing as you, I think. Not to say the same thing as, let's say generally, moved from more of a fixed meanings and Rider-Waite-Smith style, Golden Dawn style associations to the more open. I mean, even just going as far as saying the spreads don't mean anything. There's no, not to say that spreads don't mean, but the ones I use, they're just, it's a 3 with a 4th if you really want to get the answer told to you twice. But there's I've kind of moved to that, and it's hard. It's actually kind of scary.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the part that like keeps me coming back. Like I'm terrified. And especially if I'm like, if the reading is for anyone else but me, then like the terror is like magnified like tenfold. It's like, I don't know how to read tarot at all. But like there's an aliveness to that I'm like kind of like leaning into. So yeah, I feel you on that, like, standing at the abyss kind of feeling in terms of trying to figure it out.
I really love what you said, beginner's mind. That's brilliant. Like that's an idea that I really love, bringing that to that. And I also like the thing that you said. around describing it to yourself. Can you kind of just spend a minute on that? Because I really like what you just said there. But what does that mean when you see a card and describe it? Like,
yeah, I mean, kind of like approaching that beginner's mind standpoint of like, I don't know anything, and like really taking like the all the way to like that full level of like I don't know shit. Like this is like I'm not like at all cool for not knowing anything. Like I'm just like don't know anything. And so as much as possible, kind of like dropping into that space, like everything I knew about tarot, like is suddenly gone in this moment. And sometimes that literally happens, which makes it scarier. But it's like, what is it that I see? Is like, okay, I see like 3 sticks, like 2 crossed against each other, like 1 running down the middle, and then the next card, like it's like I see like a naked woman kneeling down, like pouring water into a river, and it's nighttime, and there's a bird on the tree, and like so on and so forth, like just at that very like literal concrete level of description. And it's sort of like, why, like how do you get anywhere with that? And I think what I realize is that operating in this mode, and especially, and that's the other thing that I didn't say, like I don't find that this approach necessarily always feels like it works equally well with any type of deck. Like there's a quality of artwork that that I think I look for, and I don't know exactly totally how to articulate it other than it's weird. And it's like weird in a particular way that the Marseille decks are very weird. And their weirdness has a lot of different dimensions. I mean, it's what they depict. It's like the roughness of the actual artwork itself, because they're reproductions of these like mass-produced things, where maybe they're done by craftspeople, but maybe they're just like shoddily done and they like have some kid coloring it, like there's just like lots of layers of strangeness to them. And I think what happens when I like do that like literal level of description with a deck whose art is like sufficiently weird is that it feels like it's the same process as like dream interpretation. It's just like, what the hell happened in that dream? And it's like, well, I was in this car, and it's the same disjunction of dreams too. It's like I was in this car, but then I was in this room, and that kind of like mirrors exactly the way that like how you move from one card to the other. Sometimes there's like more obvious like transitional objects, or like the scene is similar and you can kind of like see them in the same room, or that there's a logical movement that goes from one to the other. But sometimes it's just like completely different, and you still have to account for the gap between those two. And I feel like that's like how that is done in dreams, where you're like just saying literally all the weird shit that like happened in the sequence that they did. You kind of take individual pieces and you kind of like create links where there wasn't a link necessarily in like that was explicit in the dream, and then like that dream's weirdness kind of erupts into a significance that is like graspable and affecting in the waking world. And I kind of feel like that is what's happening when I like read in that particular way. It's kind of like asking for a dream, basically.
Let me grab something right here, because
Yeah.
I feel you're slightly responsible for this. Well, more than slightly responsible. So I've got this.
Oh yeah.
Because I saw you posting about it on Twitter. I was like, oh, Susie Chank's dope. I want to read what this is about. I don't know. Could you tell us what am I looking at? What are we doing here? This is dense, because she's an actual genius in the like genius way. It's like my brain is exploding. So what am I looking at? What is this?
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, I saw that she was putting that out, and I don't know. I think I wanted it because, if I was going to kind of like mess around with kind of the esoteric correspondence stuff, the Decans felt like the most approachable way in, just from my astrological study. And knowing her familiarity with Austin Coppock's work and drawing a lot of inspiration from his 36 Faces book, I was like, okay, this is going to be something I'll be able to get into. And it was, but it became so much more and gave me like a much like I've enjoyed her podcast. I haven't listened to like the entire like library, the back catalog, but I've always enjoyed like the conversations and the explorations that she's done, even though like I said, it's like a lot of it is pretty unfamiliar. Like anytime the tree of life comes into things, I'm just like, I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about. Um, but so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna check this out. And I think reading it, besides, yeah, giving me that in with the astrology of the decans, I kind of got a clearer sense of what of like how you arrive at this sort of like more like poetic numinous space like through those correspondences. And almost I sometimes wonder if if it's partly because like she's working with so many layers like simultaneously, like she's got like this deep like mapping like at like 10 different like one card like this is like it sort of goes beyond fixed meaning at that point, right? Like it's like an entire universe in and of itself,
multi-dimensional.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, seeing how flexibly she's able to use that, where it's like not necessarily always like a perfect synthesis of every single layer, but like different pieces of that correspondence map will sort of like emerge like on as they are needed, like for the relevant context or the or for the question. And I love seeing how she connected like these really like high like esoteric ideas to incredibly mundane situations. And I think that is something that people can struggle with when they kind of like go deeply into that system, where it's like, okay, like I think I understand something about the mystery of the universe, but what does this have to do with my car? Right. um, and I don't know, there's a way that she really like demonstrates that in this beautiful way. And she really shows herself in terms of like her full body, full self, like full life engagement with the cards.
It seems like that's there in the book. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. And honestly, I've also found that book to be kind of itself a good like bibliomantic text. It's a beautiful book that fleshes out those 36 minor cards in a way that I've not seen in any other source. So yeah, it's beautiful. Totally recommend it to everyone.
I'm getting ready to really dive into it and get my mind blown. So but it seems intensely intimidating book. I think it goes back to that genius idea, but also my intimidation by astrology in general. But
you'll I don't know. I feel like that feeling will go away quickly just because of her tone, like the way that she writes and just her general personality really comes off, and like it just feels like you're hanging out with someone like who's just doing their like errands and like but then all of this like layer of stuff like gets interwoven, and so like those mundane things take on this really like profound dimension by their connection to the cards.
Jason, is there anything we didn't cover that we should cover?
Let me think. I guess kind of going back to sort of other ways to think about Eight of Wands in particular, there's there are sort of non-Golden Dawn ways of approaching like single cards and their meanings, and that kind of blends the open meaning with some sort of more esoteric overlays, but kind of thinking about like the numerology of like eights coupled with the suit of wands. I think it ends up overlapping with the Golden Dawn, but in a kind of a different way, or from a different direction. Because I think of eights, starting with like the more base number of 4, kind of being this number of like stability and structure. And then you have eights, which is the doubling of that. So we have this really like tight, like locking in of like the material level of reality. um, which in one way can be sort of a type of like success in that like it's the it is like the full like manifestation of a thing, like it's the product uh, kind of existing in this reality. It's kind of moved fully into the level of form, um, which gives it a certain like endurance, which seems like it would be the total opposite of like kind of this like swiftness idea that comes from like the Golden Dawn associations. But I think where there is a link between that is that if you kind of approach that eight energy subjectively, as a person, um, yeah, maybe it's like, oh my God, this is what I've been working towards, and wands kind of being like effort, labor, kind of in a more traditional sense. It's like I've worked hard and like this is what I've built, and like it's fully like here now. But the nature of reality and life is like flux and impermanent. So like what happens when you encounter this thing that is like fully like solid and that presents itself with as close uh, an illusion of like real permanence in the world, you get kind of like itchy, you get kind of restless, right? Like you're like, okay, like I've hit the end of the line. Like it's like, oh shit, like I've hit the end of the line. Like I'm done. Like what the fuck do I do now that I'm done? And like, there's a sort of like pressurization, right? And like you look at the actual like the composition of like the Marseille Eight of Wands, and you see like this tight like lattice in the center, and it almost kind of gives a little bit of a claustrophobic feeling, like almost like a choking off in some way. And so then I think you coming into it as like a living, breathing like person, you're like, oh my God, like I gotta get away from this, which makes a lot of sense with some of the other Golden Dawn eights, right? Like think of the Eight of Cups. Like it's just like, I'm out of here, guys. Like this is, like I've had enough of this. I need to like get out of here and like go into the mountains and meditate and some. But it's like you're not. But the impetus for that leaving is kind of like the pressure of the eights. And there's another deck that I have that's the Japaritsa Tarot. And I really love its image for it. It's a volcano, right? And so it like perfectly like maps on to like, I mean, both the fire association, but also like the intense like pressure there's like happening underneath that like is threatening to like erupt. And like when it does erupt, what do you get? You get that swiftness energy. You get like kind of this like being catapulted through. So I don't know. I thought that was like a really like they just seem so different at first, and then when I like thought about it some more, I'm like, oh, okay, it's almost like you can think of what is happening right before that like lightning strike swiftness moment. It's like it's the charging up, and like the pressurization around that, and in some ways of like deriving meaning with like the Marseille decks, like they'll kind of look at the majors in terms of the numbers. So if this is 8, then you would be looking at 8. In the Marseille deck, the 8th major is Justice, and then you also move like to the next level of that 18 of the Moon, which also seems like a really strange combination that I had to think about for a while, because you have this sense of order that like Justice imposes, which does give you that feeling that of the 8, but it's like, where does the Moon come in with this, right? Because the Moon just feels like totally opposite of that. And I think where those two sort of like meaningfully like blend is that because that 8 energy sort of is so structured and sort of like almost like limits your movement, it kind of forces you into this state of like receptivity, but it's a state of receptivity that's sort of not your choice, right? You're less like I'm kind of hemmed in, and I'm kind of like forced into like just like, okay, like what is this that I'm holding? What is this that I'm seeing? What is this situation that I've found myself in, or that I've imposed upon myself without knowing, and so you move into that moon like realm where it's sort of more of an inner state, because like the movement in the outer world has like begun to cease. Like there's like not as much room to maneuver, so like the space of your interiority starts to open up because you can't move like outside. So in some ways it kind of conjures like some of the meanings of the Hanged Man too. It's just like what happens when you can't go anywhere, like what happens on the inside. And I feel like there's something about the eights that that does that too. And because it's the wands, like maybe it's, you know, the blessing and the curse of like achieving what you wanted, right? Like just like I got it. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I like that. I like the blessing and the curse. Yeah, I like the achieving what you want. Jason, this is so cool. Thanks for coming on, man. This was really great.
Yeah,
I really
appreciate
it.